Do you ever wish you could be a little older than you are? I imagine that you do from time to time because when you're young, becoming older seems to be the best way to solve your problems. For some of you, being older means you get to drive and no longer rely on your parents to take you places. Sounds like freedom, and you can't wait to hear it ring. For others of you, getting older means you finally get to grow into that lanky frame of yours. You get to manicure a mustache and flex that muscle that to that point in time has been harder to find than a needle in a haystack. Perhaps the main reason, though, that becoming older seems so appealing is because it means you get to escape from the label assigned to young people. See, for the most part, younger equals underrated. And like we said in the first part of this series, as teenagers, we often don't like the way adults think about us, look at us, and talk about us. Whether it's rebellious, selfish, lazy, rude, irresponsible, disrespectful, careless, or foolish, there's a bunch of adjectives that adults use when talking about the teenage population. And you don't want to hear that, do you? But if we're really honest with ourselves, wouldn't we say that some of that criticism is true? I mean, not you, of course. You are as innocent as a little lamb. I'm talking about teenagers in general. Don't you know some of them that are rebellious, selfish, lazy, rude, irresponsible, disrespectful, careless, and foolish? I mean, if you had a niece or nephew, or a cousin who's 3 years of age or younger, how many people at your school would you trust to babysit him or her? It's probably a tiny fraction of the student body population. But on the flip side, some young people break the mold and do remarkable things. Like if you hang out with a middle school student who seems super mature and responsible, it jolts you a little bit, doesn't it? When you see someone younger than you who shows incredible kindness to people, it's impressive, right? If you hear someone younger than you talk about how they want to honor God and follow Him, it's pretty cool to hear, isn't it? So let me recap. Are teenagers underrated? Yes. On the other hand, though, can you be scary sometimes when it comes to your decision making? 100%. So how do we rise above the low bar and turn the tide of our underrated reputation? Let's talk about it. Last week, we started talking about Paul and Timothy. And even though Timothy lived 2,000 years ago, you actually have something in common with him. During the time he spent traveling with Paul, he was a teenager, and when he eventually became a pastor, Paul told him, "Don't let anyone look down on you because you were young." It's pretty cool, isn't it? But Paul doesn't stop there. He goes on to try to guide Timothy in how he should and shouldn't act. So Paul talked about being led by the wrong people, loving materialistic things more than God, being prideful, getting off course. See, Paul wanted to help protect Timothy by warning him about things before he had to go through them himself. He wanted to spare Timothy some pain that can come with learning things the hard way. So Paul writes this, "Timothy, guard what has been entrusted to your care. Turn away from godless chatter and the opposing ideas of what is falsely called knowledge." So what exactly was Paul saying? He was reminding Timothy of the big responsibility he had, hence the word entrusted. And that responsibility was to live in a way that showed the people he was leading that he took his faith in Jesus seriously. Why? Because his actions had power. See, when people saw the way Timothy lived, it changed what they thought about him, and more importantly, it may have changed the way they thought about the Jesus that Timothy followed. But here's what Paul also knew. There would be distractions in Timothy's life. He would feel the temptation to fall into a pattern of living that would reinforce all the negative ideas people had about young people. On the other hand, there was so much potential to live in a way that changed that, to prove an older generation wrong in how they viewed the younger generation. So Paul tells Timothy to turn away from the things that easily bait us into bad behavior. And those things were the same for Timothy that they are for us today. Paul starts off by saying, avoid godless chatter, which basically means talk that is empty and useless. It's conversation that isn't helpful and doesn't build anybody up. And then he says, oppose the ideas that others might consider knowledge. In other words, don't just follow what people say because they sound smart or because it's popular opinion. If it doesn't seem to match up with what Jesus said, don't do it. See, ultimately, the Apostle Paul was saying to young Timothy, you focus on what you control and not worry about what people may think of you because of your age. In other words, only you can own your actions. It doesn't matter how young you are or what people may think of you because of your age. Look, you do you. You live in a way that changes people's minds about the younger people. But even if they don't budge, you know you did your part. Here's what we know. Some people will look down on you because of your age. When they see you, they think they know you, but they really only know about people your age. They think you're immature, impulsive, rude, and lazy. But while you don't have control over what they think, you do have control over your actions. So here's a few tips. Number one, think before you speak and act. Most of the time, we react. We don't think about what we're doing. We just do it impulsively. But our first reaction and initial emotions can sometimes be misleading. We have to think and process before we act. See, the more we control how we react, the less likely we will say or do something we'll regret later. Maybe that means reading that text or comment, that direct message 2 or 3 times before sending it. You may find a word or phrase that really didn't communicate what you meant, or you may realize that you shouldn't press send at all. Don't risk ruining a friendship or a relationship with someone because you weren't more slow to speak and act. Number 2, think about your environment and the people around you. This is big. We are most likely to reflect the people we spend the most time around. See, maybe you've heard the saying, you become who you hang out with. That's true. It doesn't matter how smart or how talented you are or how much you focus on making good decisions. When you hang around people who don't make the best of choices, you're more likely to make bad choices. So try this exercise to get a better feel for who has influence on you and the choices you're making. Do that by writing a list of the names of the 3 to 5 people in your life that you spend the most time with. Write them on a piece of paper. And once you do that, ask yourself, how do they act? Are they owning their own faith and actions? How do they view life? What are their values? How do they respond to authority? Evaluate carefully if those people will really help you own your own faith and get to the next level with your actions and behavior. Do they push you forward when you come to them with difficult decisions? Do they make you feel bad about making good choices? Is the way they are behaving improving the reputation of people your age or making teenagers look bad? Now make a choice of who in your list you want to continue to spend time with. Don't be afraid if none or only 1 or 2 of their people meet the standard of excellence you want to set for yourself. It can seem like an impossible task to back away from friendships that have been so important to you, but keep in mind your end goal. Who do you want to be? What do you want people to know about you and other people your age? If you're hanging around people who aren't helping you move in that direction, you probably need to reevaluate their role in your life. I know this is a lot to think about, and that's okay. This is a way for you to take charge of your life by taking charge of your actions. You don't have to be a victim of your generation's reputation or the poor choices of people around you. You get to decide who you want to be and what you want to be known for. Only you can own your actions. If you don't want to be seen as underrated, then begin making choices that reflect a different kind of behavior. Take control of your actions. Because the truth is, it all comes down to you. Only you can own your actions.